History of Capoeira. Capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian manifestation, which was developed in Brazil by slaves brought from different regions of Africa in order to work in factories, plantations, mines, and so on. Capoeira is a struggle which sprung from a need for freedom, and as a response to the abuses, beatings, mistreatments, and humiliations, black people suffered. Until today, no evidence has been found, including in Africa, to prove that capoeira was created elsewhere than in Brazil. There are no records describing when, how, or under which circumstances capoeira was created. Nevertheless, we know that capoeira sprung from African manifestations mixed in Brazil with local influences. Actually, the word capoeira comes from Tupi-Guarani, indigenous language, and means sparse wood or bushy forest. Capoeira had to be practiced with much cunning to survive through time. A good example for this is when the factory masters, senhores de engenho, realized the black people used fighting skills to escape to the quilombos, community settlement, or to save their fellow companions still captive in the quarters, senzalas. They forbid any related practices. Consequently, the slaves started using music, drums, etc., and disguised the fight as a dance. In case a supervisor would come along to forbid the practice, they would respond, "What fight? We are just dancing." Capoeira thus played a key role for the slaves in gaining freedom, allowing them to upset and challenge many powerful people. Later, capoeira reached the cities and ports of Brazil. Although capoeira was already persecuted at the time of slavery, it still was closely monitored later by the powerful, as it had become a symbol of freedom. Despite persecution, capoeira maintained itself, and this was incommoding those in power. Capoeiristas organized themselves in gangs, maltas, bringing all types of disorder in popular festivals. On 11 November 1890, the government of Marechal Deodoro da Fonseca prohibited by law the practice of capoeira throughout Brazil and established severe prison sentences which could include punishments such as 300 whiplashes with salt and cachaça on the wounds. The peak of the persecution happened around 1893 when capoeiristas of Rio de Janeiro were sentenced to forced labor on the island of Fernando de Noronha. In Bahia, those caught practicing capoeira were sent to certain death on the front line in the War of 1894. To the surprise of many, they turned out very successful and took a decisive part in the victory. In Recife, the gangs became slowly extinguished around 1912, when capoeira was mixed to other popular elements giving birth to frevo. It was not until the 20th century in the 30s that capoeira was legalized. It is necessary to mention two mestres who played an important and fundamental role in this conquest. Mestre Pastinha, Vicente Ferreira Pastinha, defender and proponent of the Capoeira Angola, a mestre who was respected by many important politicians and artists for his unique vision and his organizational skills. He enjoyed a lot of trust from renowned mestres from his epoch, and was chosen by them to be the one to keep alive the traditions and the mission of Capoeira Angola. Mestre Bimba, Manuel dos Reis Machado, has caused a revolution in capoeira and brought numerous new modifications and elements to capoeira. These modifications included changes in the game and the instruments. Mestre Bimba introduced the traditional formation of the band, one berimbau and two pandeiros. He invented different toques de berimbau, rhythm or style, for different games, and incorporated golpes, kicks, from other martial arts. He also invented a new teaching methodology based on learning sequencias, sequences of movements, which no one had done before. Mestre Bimba was the first capoeirista who taught lessons in a capoeira academy. In 1932, he founded the Centro de Cultura Física e Luta Regional in Engenho Velho de Brotas, Bahia, giving birth to Luta Regional Baiana. This name was chosen by Mestre Bimba, who wanted to be publicly recognized as an educator and trainer, in order to avoid the use of the word capoeira, which symbolized marginalization. His methodology was eventually recognized by the Ministry of Education and Public Health as an official sport. Thanks to these changes, Mestre Bimba started to be noticed even by the elite from Bahia, arising interests in his teaching. Over the years, he became more and more famous, so that the President Getulio Vargas once assisted one of his shows with his students. Impressed by the beauty of the sport, the president revoked in 1937 the law prohibiting capoeira in Brazil. Quilombo, a refuge for slaves, remote from the fazendas, farms, and cities, usually difficult to access, where also free, black, white, and indigenous people lived. It was the dream of every slave to escape and hide in the nearest quilombo. The biggest and most famous one was Palmares. Its most famous leader, Zumbi, a great warrior, turned his quilombo into a real fort almost impossible to take under control. Senzala, the quarters where the slaves were holed. Slaves were only allowed to leave them for work or for punishment. Casa Grande was the name for the main house of the property, where the slave keeper and his family lived. Señores de Engenho were the owners of big farms, rich people who exploited the slaves. Feitores, cruel commanders in charge of the security of the property. They guarded the slaves, preventing them from escaping. It was also their responsibility to punish the slaves for any kind of misbehavior. Capitães do Mato was a person responsible for bringing escaped slaves back to the owner. Maltas, groups of capoeiristas, which caused all types of trouble. They would terrorize the society of Rio de Janeiro in the 19th century. The most renowned groups were Guaiamus and Nagoas.